Lyddie, Chapter 15. Rachel. She told no one about the money. She wanted to tell Diana. Diana, she knew, would rejoice with her, but she decided to wait. She was so close now to having the money she needed, and when she did, she would surprise Diana by signing the petition. Then, not more than a week after Luke had brought the money, she had a second visitor who turned her life upside down. She had left the bedroom door open, trying to encourage a faint breeze through the stuffy room while she washed out her stockings and underwear in the basin, and suddenly she was aware of Tim standing in the doorway. She looked up from her washing. "There's a visitor for you in the parlor. Ma says to tell you. A gentleman." Charlie, she was sure, it must be he, all grown up to a gentleman, for who else would come to see her? She could hardly count Luke Stevens. She squeezed the water from her laundry and hastily wiped her hands upon her apron as she ran down the stairs. But it wasn't Charlie waiting in the corner of the dining room that Mrs. Bedloe called a parlor, nor was it Luke. She wondered why Tim had even called him a gentleman at all. At first she was sure he was a stranger. He seemed so out of place in the room of neatly dressed, chattering factory girls, this short man, very thin, with a weathered face and the homespun clothes of a hill farmer. "Don't you know your uncle, eh?" the man asked at the same moment she recognized him for Judah, Aunt Clarissa's husband, whom she hadn't seen since she was a small thing. "Made it in 2 days," he boasted. "Slept right in the wagon." She tried to smile, but her heart was beating like a churning blade against her breast. What could have brought him here? Anything to do with Clarissa? Clarissa had always spelled trouble. "What's the matter?" She spoke as quietly as she could, feeling every eye in the crowded parlor turned their way. "Why'd you come?" He sobered at once, as though remembering a solemn duty. "Your Aunt Clarissa thought you needed to know." "Told what?" A chill went through her. "Your ma's never been stout, you know. The fever. Did she catch the fever?" He glanced around at the girls sitting in the room, who were pretending not to listen, but whose ears stood up alert as wild creatures in a meadow. He lowered his voice, tapping his head. "Stout up here, eh?" Lydia stared at him. What had they done to her mother? Judah dropped his eyes, uncomfortable under her stare. "So we've been obliged—" "What have you done to my mother?" she whispered fiercely. "We've been obliged to remand her to Brattleboro, to the asylum, down there." "But that's for crazy folks." Judah put on the face of a hound dog sorrow and sighed deeply. "It were just too much care for poor Clarissa, delicate as she be." "Why didn't you ask me? I've been responsible for her before I can do it," said Lyddie. He cocked his head. "You weren't there, eh?" "Where's Rachel? What have you done with the baby?" "What?" he said, relieved to have gotten off the subject of her mother. "Oh, why, she's just right out front in the wagon. I brung her to you." Lyddie brushed past him out the door. The farm wagon stood outside, the patient oxen, oblivious to how comical out of place they looked on a city street, chewed their cuds contentedly for all the stuffiness upstairs. It was damp and chilly down on the street, and Rachel sat shivering on the bench of the wagon, wrapped in a worn shawl that Lyddie recognized as her mother's. She climbed up on the wagon step and lifted the child down. Rachel was too light, boneless as a rag doll. As Lyddie went up the steps of the boarding house, she could feel her tiny burden trembling through the shawl. "It's all right, Rachie. It's me, Lyddie," she said, hoping the child could remember her. She carried Rachel inside to where Judah still stood, nervously pinching the rim of his sweat-stained hat. "It's your sister, Rachie," Judah boomed out, his voice fake with hearty cheer. A gasp went up from the girls in the parlor. "Like Aunt Clarissa told you, eh? We brung you to Lyddie." "Have you got her things?" said Lyddie. In answer he went out to the wagon and brought back a sack with a small lump at the bottom. "What about my mother's things?" she said coldly, no longer caring about the audience and what they heard. "There weren't hardly nothing," he said. She let it go. He was nearly right. "Well," he said, looking from one sister to the other, "I'll be off then, eh? I'm coming to fetch our mother soon as I can. As soon as I pay off the debt, I'll take her back and care for her myself." He turned at the door, the hat brim rolled tight and squeezed in the big hand. "Back where?" "Home," she repeated, "to the farm." "We be selling it," he said. "We gotta have the money for Brattleboro." "No!" Her voice was so sharp that the roomful of girls stopped everything they were doing to stare. Even little Rachel twisted in her arms to look at her with alarm. She went close to Judah and lowered her voice to a fierce whisper. "No one can sell that land except my father." "He give permission," said Judah. How? She was seized with a wild hope. Her father? They had heard from him? When? Before he left, he had it wrote out and put his mark to it, in case, eh? She wanted to scream at him, but how could she? She had already frightened Rachel. You got no right, she said between her teeth. We got no choice, the man said stubbornly. We be responsible, and he was gone. Once more, Lyddie was aware of the other girls in the room who were watching her open mouth and gaping at the dirty little bundle in her arms. She buried her face in the shawl. Come on, Rachie, she said as much to them as to the child. We gotta go meet Mrs. Bedloe. She straightened up tall and made her way through the chairs and the knees to the kitchen. Mrs. Bedloe, the housekeeper, was sitting in the kitchen rocker, peeling potatoes for tomorrow's hash. What in heaven's name? At the housekeeper's sharp question, Rachel's litter came up from the depths of the shawl like a turtle from a shell. It's Rachel, Mrs. Bedloe. Lyddie made her voice as gentle as she could. My sister Rachel. She could read the warning in Mrs. Bedloe's eyes. No men, no children, except for the keeper's own, in a corporation house, but surely the woman would not have the heart. I'm begging a bath for her. She had a long, long journey in an ox cart, and she chilled right through. Eh, Rachel? Rachel stiffened in her arms, but Mrs. Bedloe dropped her paring knife into a bowl of peeled potatoes, wiped her hands on her apron, and put a kettle on to boil. It was only after they had both seen Rachel safely sleep in Lyddie's bed that Mrs. Bedloe said the words that Lyddie knew were on her mind. It won't do, you know. She can't stay here. I'll get her a job she can doff. You know she's not old enough or strong enough to be a doffer, just till I can straighten things out. Lyddie pleaded. Please let her stay. I'll get it all set in just a few days, eh? Mrs. Bedloe sighed and made to shake her head. I'll pay, of course, full board, and you see how small she is. You know she won't eat a full share. Mrs. Bedloe sat down and picked up her paring knife. Lyddie held her breath. A week, even then. It wouldn't be more than a fortnight, I give you my vow. I just got to write my brother. Mrs. Bedloe looked doubtfully, but she didn't say no. She just sighed and started to peel again, the long coil so thin it was almost transparent. I'm obliged to you, Mrs. Bedloe. I got nowhere to turn else. She mustn't go outdoors. We can't have her seen about the premises. No, I swear, I'll keep her in my room. The other girls won't even know. Mrs. Bedloe looked at Lyddie wryly. They already knew, and there's no guarantee they'll keep their peace. I'll beg them. No need to coop her up more than necessary. She can come down with me during the day. I'll have Tim help her with her letters and numbers in the afternoon. She ought to be in school herself. Oh, she will be, Mrs. Bedloe. She will be. Soon as I can get these things worked out, I swear upon my life. You need to watch your language, my girl. Set an example for the little one. I thank you, Mrs. Bedloe. You'll not be sorry, I promise. She wrote Charlie that night after curfew in the flickering light of a forbidden stub of a candle. Dear Brother Charles, I hope you are well. I am sorry to trouble you with sad news, but Uncle Judah come tonight to Lowell and brung Rachel to me. They have put our mother into the asylum at Brattleboro. Now they are thinking to sell the farm. You must go and stop them. You are the man of the family. Judah won't pay me no mind. They got to listen to you. I got more than $100 to the debt. Do not let them sell. Charlie, I beg you. I don't know what to do with Rachel. Children are not allowed in Corporation House. If I can, I will take her home, but I got to have a home to go to. It is up to you, Charlie. Please, I beg you, stop Uncle Judah. Your loving sister, Lydia Worthing. And this is the end of part 1 of chapter 15.